If I was going to survive successfully in both realms as a family member and as a professional practicing painter, I needed to be really focused and diligent about my studio hours. So I started to be more disciplined about scheduling my time as a painter.
The art world is always changing. It's a dynamic space where creativity and commerce collide. Finding your path and staying true to your craft isn't easy. Welcome to the Professional Artist Podcast. This show explores what it truly takes to build a meaningful and sustainable art career. Each week, we offer intimate deep dives that reveal which art business practices actually work, giving you the inspiration and insight to fuel your artistic journey. I'm your host today, Christina Damiani, and in this episode, we're exploring the world of Noah Buchanan, a contemporary figurative painter known for his dramatic narrative works. Inspired by art history and 17th century masters such as Caravaggio, Noah's works delve into light, shadow, and human emotion. With an MFA from the New York Academy of Art, his internationally exhibited paintings are held in major collections and have been featured in prominent art publications, establishing him as a leader in contemporary realism. In this episode, we're uncovering some of the most important lessons Noah has learned from his long career. Here's what you'll gain from this deep dive: how to balance creating art with the responsibilities of family life, practices to develop lasting gallery and collector relationships while staying true to your artistic voice, and the one productivity trick you can use each day to stay focused and consistent in your studio. All right, let's head into the gallery and explore the world of Noah Buchanan. Noah introduces us to a painting he's chosen to represent his practice. It's called Dreaming Girl, and it invites us to imagine a threshold between worlds.
It's a very strong chiaroscuro lighting on a young girl about 8 years old. My stepdaughter, Eva, I asked to pose for this painting at the time. And the strong chiaroscuro lighting is something that I've done really frequently, or almost in full commitment since I really fell in love with Caravaggio-esque lighting and with a lot of 17th century, I want to say, but also Baroque is the term that often comes out, aesthetics, the drama, the swirling drapery, dramatic light. And so that's the foundation of this painting. But then there's a very obvious pictorial device going on here, which is extreme foreshortening. I'm showing an homage to Montaigne and Montaigne's Dead Christ, and really wanting to challenge myself. I remember making this painting, just really wanting to see if I could make that work, that extreme foreshortening, not just make it believable, but also does it work compositionally? It's very difficult to do because the figure obviously becomes super abstracted. You're having the feet towards you and the head far away. The theme of being in a dream is a very typical feeling, always running in the background of my mind and in my paintings. Being in a dream mode is we're in this strange reality where we surrender to all of these dynamics that are happening in our subconscious and all of the characters that we encounter in the dream, at least from a Jungian perspective. All of those people are pieces of ourselves. For me, there's always the question of, is this person asleep or are they deceased? And I like that idea because the deceased is like full surrender. We fully have detached from this world. And a dream is half like that, where we fully detach from the real world and we're off in this other dimension. In this pose, she has one palm up and one palm down. And with the palm up is usually iconographically a symbol that this person has passed away. But then the palm down means they're asleep. But she's doing both. And the book in the background is a connection to all of our experiences of childhood, the storybook and the open imagination. These peonies have been clipped from the bush from which they grew, but now they're just floating in the darkness, which is, I think, poetically how I feel about ourselves when we're in that dream state.
Where does a painting come from? For Noah, creating is a dialogue with something greater than ourselves. He takes us through his creative process and how he explores turning feeling into form.
There's this kind of prevailing urge of my own that is, I think there's another feeling that's always there. And it seems to always come for me from this particular painting by Giuseppe de Ribera, which is Saint Jerome and the Angel of Judgment. It's a painting that I saw when I was about 16 years old, only in book form. I've never actually seen the painting in person, but I absolutely love it. I've copied it. I've drawn it a million times. And the feeling in this painting that I'm describing, it's St. Jerome is down on his knees and he's in this black space and he's in shock and terror as he looks up into the sky and his hands are raised in exaltation and an angel is breaking through into the mortal world and blowing a horn and calling St. Jerome into action. And just stripping that down, not just that specific narrative, but stripping it down that there is a mortal figure who is interfacing with a divine force. The divine force could be from any tradition that you like. It could be from, obviously, from Judeo-Christian sources, but it could also be from Greco-Roman themes. I like that idea that God can come through the fabric of the air and shock us, shake us awake. And those themes in art history have always appealed to me since I was a little boy, and they still do. So that, I think, is always at the heart of an image that I'm making is how am I going to capture that feeling in this painting, even though it might not literally be a narrative of the divine and the mortal interacting. Sometimes it is in my paintings. It's literally that. But sometimes it's the dreaming girl. So that's the seed of the idea. Once with that seed in mind, I'll sit down and I'll start scribbling, literally scribbling in the sketchbook. And I don't always know what those scribbles are necessarily. Sometimes I have an idea that, oh, this represents a figure that's reclining, or I want to have these two figures interacting in these certain poses, but I don't know what it means yet. I feel like the painting is there and the meaning is there, but I'm like breaking through these deeply hidden feelings and messages that are somewhere in the subconscious. The scribbles then evolve and become a little bit more refined and a little bit more clarified. Once I have a clear picture in front of me, usually at a very small scale, I'll hire models and I bring in the models into the studio and they help me refine the poses a little further. And I start to discover what's possible. Is it possible to have the model take exactly the pose I had envisioned, or more likely, there's some kind of compromise involved where I had sketched out a pose from invention like this, but then the model has to bend the other way a little bit just for plausibility of their own body. And I find the poses, and sometimes that refines the narrative and the composition a little bit. Once I've got the models working for me, I can create much more refined drawings. And so that's a critical step for me with every painting is making a very finished drawing of the pose. Then I can begin painting. I'll get up in the morning, and if a painting is in progress, and I need to make drawing studies for figures, for portraits, I think that my natural kind of biorhythm as a painter is that I like to spend those morning hours working on the drawing. And then I'll have lunch. And then at about 1 o'clock, go into the studio here for the afternoon session and start the painting. So that will be shifting away from the drawings and working on a painting that's in mid progress. I used to just work one painting at a time. And if it was two paintings, that was a lot for me, and I think two was good because a lot of times you encounter an obstacle in a painting that you're working on where, I can't work on this today. That's slowly conflated over the years to now like having 4 or 5 paintings going on at the same time. It can be bad in that sometimes you feel totally frazzled and confused about what you should be working on that any given day. You come in and you think, okay, I'm going to work on that today. But then you look at this painting over here and you think, oh, that needs some work. I need to do that. And sometimes they're just little things on every painting. And at the end of the day, you feel like you didn't do anything substantive and it leaves you with a bad feeling. But that's kind of the painter's madness and frazzled thoughts that maybe just goes with the territory of being an artist and a painter.
But what have you learned over time is the key to staying focused and being productive and prolific and not being pulled everywhere in the studio?
I think I learned this from my friend Bo Bartlett. I'm pretty sure he told me once that the night before, makes a list in his journal of all the tasks he'll do the next day. And I found that really works for me really well. You might think I could just figure that out when I walk into the studio in the morning. I'll just walk in, I'll look at the paintings, I'll say, okay, I need to do A, B, and C. But then in the morning, you walk in and you have that moment, and it's very confusing, and you forget some of the things that you thought about the night before, and it feels frazzling. Whereas if I write it down as a list of the tasks that I want to accomplish the night before and just leave it on the table or pinned on the wall next to the painting if I really don't want to forget to do something, I'll do some version of that. And it really focuses me. If I come in the morning and I'm always like half asleep and I look at the paper and I go, okay, I'm supposed to repaint the flower in the background. It centers me. It just gives me this nice focused list of tasks to work through. Whenever I do it, it works really well. And then when I don't do it and I have a lot of pieces going on, that might be a day where I end up feeling frazzled and I just githered all day long. So that's a little funny trick that I use that really does help. And I would recommend that to a lot of painters.
Noah's next piece, The Night Harvesters, marks a turning point in his practice. What began as a nocturnal scene beneath fruit trees evolved into a revelation about the hidden parts of the self.
The Night Harvesters, and pivotal in the true sense that like my work really pivoted at this moment. It's a very recent painting. I started work on this painting, I think 2 summers ago now. And I had my wife and my stepdaughter pose out in our garden under some fruit trees and in this narrative that they were harvesting the fruit. I wanted the painting to feel like it's done at night as a nocturne with moonlight illuminating the subject matter. But I used what they call in a lot of filming, cinematic filming techniques, day for night technique, where you're actually filming it and staging it during the daytime and then putting this all together in the studio. So doing drawings of them in the different poses and then using the drawings to puzzle this all together to find the composition. So I'll take the drawings, I'll photocopy them, I'll print them out, I'll cut them up and collage them together as a way of finding the composition. But I think where this painting is really pivotal for me and a change in my working habits and in terms of identity as a painter is that for the first time in my work, it acknowledges form and information inside the shadow shapes. I have artist statements from the past that say, I'm committed lifelong to this practice of chiaroscuro, where the shadows are voids and the light is this sublime thing. And I suddenly started to realize that paintings that really were exciting me maybe in the past several years were not made in stark lighting, but were actually made in more soft ambient lights, like in the interior of a room or on a gray overcast day. And basically what's happening is these are figures that are posing inside of a shadow. But there's a whole other level and layer to this. And that goes back to Jungian ideas and Carl Jung's concept of the shadow theory of our subconscious. And that is that we take valid parts of ourselves, good parts of ourselves, of our what should be in our psyche, our outer thinking of how we are. And we bury them in our subconscious for some reason because we think we're not supposed to do this or we're not supposed to be that way. And these things go into our shadow, as Jung talks about. I was literally painting the shadows, what Jung talks about as putting things in the shadows. So the idea of not allowing myself to see information in the shadow in my paintings was something that I actually wanted and had repressed. And so it was really comical and ironic to me that for me, what was in my Jungian shadow, so to speak, was literally the shadow.
Every work an artist releases into the world becomes part of an ecosystem. Noah shares exactly how he prepares a body of work for galleries and collectors, and why letting go of control is the final part of the creative process.
Typically, I hold my paintings back for sometimes a year or 2 years or 3 years at the longest, and trying to collect them into a body of work. Usually that body of work has some kind of overarching theme to it, like certain poetic theme, and that usually informs the title of what would be a show in a gallery. So once I have enough works that sort of complete the show, where the show feels cohesive and that there's enough of them, I ship them out. Of course, they're all photographed first. You want to get really excellent photography of each painting. Each painting should be carefully varnished. I usually put a very thin, modest frame on the painting. I don't want the painting to feel constrained by the frames. I think this is a great strategic frame to use on the way to the gallery because it makes the painting look fantastic. It's very thin and economic, and it's not going to exponentially increase the crate that you need to use to ship to the gallery. In my case, I'm shipping a lot of times these works out to New York. So I live in California and I need to build crates for these, and they're getting picked up by a truck and driven across the country. Then they'll be in an exhibit in a gallery for a month. And at that point in time, you have to surrender to the gallery and really let them do their work. That's what they're there for. They have an amazing ability to make connections with potential clients, to network, and you have to let go and just sit back and let it happen for the month that the work is being exhibited. And then, the work is then transferred to the client. Now, the hardest part about that for a lot of painters is that sale is then shared equally with the gallery. And the philosophy is, of course, that sale wouldn't have happened if the gallery hadn't done its work. So they are entitled and deserve half the sale. But the other side of what happens sometimes is that you make a painting and maybe it's shared on your website, and people from the outside world, maybe they've seen the painting on social media, or maybe they've seen it by visiting your website. They begin to contact you just directly and say, I'm interested in this painting. Is it available? And sales can happen that way too. Now, I used to actually, even though it really means more money for the artist, and I used to feel disappointed when that would happen because I didn't care about the money so much as I cared about exhibiting the painting. I think that for me, the gallery is so important because in my mind, it's like a miniature museum and it's giving the painting its chance to be seen by the world. And that always meant more to me than the money did. I've had the luxury of being a professor, so I have a stable, steady income that way. And it lets me paint what I want to paint. And I really just want to exhibit the paintings. But now, with the advent of social media, namely Instagram, I can reach a much bigger audience even than I would have having had the opening at the gallery. I can have an opening at a gallery, and how many people come, including the opening and to the run of the show through the month. For me, it's not that the numbers aren't that big, maybe 1,000 people or 2,000 people at most or something. But on social media, I mean, you can post not only the finished painting, but you can post all the stages of the painting. And there's this really robust dialogue going on about it with your followers and friends and family. And of course, now it's global. People are commenting on your painting from Iran and from Canada and from Brazil. And it's like all at the same time. And then I realized I didn't have as many qualms about letting a painting go privately out of the studio. Plus, you're not sharing a commission with the gallery. So I don't know. I'm at a pivotal moment in my career where I still crave the opening and the gallery relationship. And yet I feel very fulfilled by knowing that the work is seen by the world on social media.
For artists working with galleries, it's not about compromise, it's about partnership and mutual respect. Noah shares what it really takes to balance your vision with the gallery's business and how to turn that tension into trust.
It's a tricky relationship because you have to appreciate that they are trying to pay the rent, and that's no small feat. If it's a good gallery and they're in a prominent, attractive city, renting space in an area of high traffic or a gallery district, that rent is pretty staggering what they need to cover every month. So I have a lot of sympathy for them. And it's a hard task. And so realizing that they need to display and exhibit work that is sellable. It's, of course, we just want to paint whatever we want to paint, but then asking them to hang that up it's a big ask sometimes, especially if your work is maybe like shocking or grotesque. Sometimes the nature of what that image looks can be a big ask for a gallery to hang up on the wall and invite clients to consider purchasing. And then it leads to a month where they don't have any sales and then jeopardizes their business. So I guess keeping in mind what they're trying to accomplish when you're having a show with them and being sympathetic to the relationship that they're going to ask you. They're probably at some point going to say, we really like these 4 paintings that you've done in the past. We'd love to see a show of just things like this. And that always is a tricky moment with the artist and the gallery. The artist can start to feel like the gallery is controlling them and not allowing them to explore their vision and to evolve. The gallery's telling me that these 4 or 5 paintings I've done are real sellers and they can really build a clientele and they can establish a theme and an identity for the artist. And that can either be appealing to some painters, it could also maybe feel constraining to other painters. In my own experience with galleries, I've totally ridden the line of trying to help make them happy, trying to give them things that they can sell, but then also just sometimes not doing what they've asked me to do. Maybe that's the thing you have to do as a painter is you have to do a little bit of both. It's a tricky line to ride, but in the end, I think a good gallery relationship is one where they care about you as an artist and want you to be happy as an artist, and the artist kind of cares about the needs of the gallery too. And a lot of times you become friends with your gallerists. They're people, they have families, and they're showing your work because they believe in your work. And that's a big deal. A lot of people just don't, they look at your paintings, they don't care. It's just not their thing. They could care less. This is somebody who believes in your work to the point where they're going to put it up in their gallery and make a beautiful presentation of it, a catalog. They're going to spend the whole month, maybe before and after the show, trying to get clients in to see the paintings, and they're working hard for you. So this mutual appreciation has to be in place, I think, for a good gallery relationship to flourish.
What makes an art critic pay attention? Noah reminds us that recognition isn't about luck, it's about showing up authentically and consistently.
They come about from different reasons. Sometimes it is because of a show you're having. And I've had writers from magazines reach out and said, like to do a piece on your show. That's part of it is maybe having shows, writers, art critics start to realize, oh, here's somebody who's consistent and building a pattern with their work, a story with their work. A real career is happening here. I want to do some writing about it. So I think part of getting there is like having a couple shows under your belt and then attracting writers in that way. I think that having an active and robust social media presence is a good way to have that hook out there that will attract arts writers to come in and say, I'd like to write a review on your work for this online publication, or maybe it's a hard copy publication like a magazine and print. I think those 2 things are the best way to attract that to happen. What do you do? Do you call up a bunch of arts writers? Now, I've done that. I'm not ashamed to say I've written emails to New York Times and other publications saying, hey, I'd love it if you take a look at my show. You send a message to an art critic and say, we'd love it if you'd visit the show. And you don't even have to suggest, would you write a piece on it, but just say, come see the show. And you figure if they either really like it or really hate it, maybe they'll write something about it.
The final work Noah shares is The Melancholic Painter, a vivid self portrait that's both humorous and haunting. With loved ones reimagined as characters in a chaotic scene, he turns family life into allegory, capturing the push and pull of what it means to make art while being bombarded by everything else.
I love this painting too. It's one of my favorites. It's still obviously in a very Caravaggesque mode with chiaroscuro lighting. and also Caravaggio's sense of chaos and eruptive action happening in the painting. I've always loved that in the past with my work, and really striving for this kind of high drama, high activity action. If people are flying through the air, I love that. And I think that this painting, it has a lot to do with the inner struggle that painters and really artists of all nature wrestle with, all of these competing voices in their head. And so what we see in this painting is the painter's in a melancholy state because he's trapped into this chaos of voices. And many of the voices in the background of this painting orbiting around him are the negative ones. By the way, also on a kind of a fun level, this painting is functioning as like a family portrait. So obviously it's a self-portrait with the painter is me, but immediately around me are my immediate family members. My wife is directly hovering overhead as the voice of inspiration, the painter's inspiration. My stepson, who's like actually reaching down and touching my arm, is like an angelic force, which I think I meant as a symbol of this feeling that many artists either have, that they acknowledge or they feel it subconsciously, is like a spiritual mandate to make art. And maybe your family doesn't agree. You should do this. So we have this mandate to be an artist, and he's that voice. And then my stepdaughter in the corner is the little girl blowing like a spitwad at me. And she's like one of the voices of criticism or rejection. Down in the lowest corner of the painting is our family dog, Poppy, who's just still part of the family, and she's often hanging out in the studio while I'm painting. A dog is always going to symbolize fidelity and loyalty and dedication, but not just to the craft of painting, but to your obligations in your family. In other words, the things that pull you away from your time in the studio, to be a parent, to be a spouse, and to put time and energy into that is obviously taking time away from your practice as a painter.
A universal challenge for artists is balancing creation with family life. Listen as Noah shares how a commitment that once scared him ended up having a beautiful and unexpected impact on his work.
I remember as all my years as a bachelor that I was terrified of being a member of a family, to be a husband and a dad. Terrified of that because of the obvious thing that it would take away or negate my ability to be an artist. I didn't get married until I was 40. My wife had been a widow, and my kids were my stepkids. And so I walked into this family, and at first it was chaotic, right? Like little toddlers running around and their daily schedule, getting them to school and learning to juggle things like having a car seat in the back of your car. And I realized ironically that what had always terrified about me about that is not having enough time to be a painter was the exact opposite. Desperate to maintain a studio practice and a career as a painter, but also now be a committed part of a family. I focused my studio time in a more disciplined manner. I realized that as a bachelor, my working hours were all over the place. They were late into the night. Invitations would come in the middle of the day to go meet some friends for this. And my studio practice wasn't focused and it wasn't scheduled and organized. If I was going to survive successfully in both realms as a family member and as a professional practicing painter, I needed to be really focused and diligent about my studio hours. So I started to be more disciplined about scheduling my time as a painter. And the irony is I became more productive than I had when I was just completely single and alone. But the other big irony about it that I learned is that the very nature of being in a family means that you're living life and you're growing and you're learning and you're grappling with these major life themes, which then become the very subject matter of your paintings. A lot of life gets lived and learned and wrestled with in a family. And these are the most human themes. It's like where the prime material is of balancing all these things, all the struggles, all the joys, hopes and fears, failures and victories. And it becomes some of the strongest material to then poetically riff off of as a painter. So it was a beautiful thing that what I was most terrified of, I think, in my younger years was actually the key to success and to making this actually be a realistic construct for an artistic life.
Looking back on his career, Noah reflects on the importance of just going for it when opportunities arise, and how we should all think about the nature of time.
I think there was a couple of years where I was beating myself up about it, but I think the singular thing I would have done, I remember when Instagram was first created and I just laughed at it. And somebody said, "You should get on Instagram. It's really great, especially for artists." And I said, "I'm not going to do that. That's like silly. I already have Facebook and I'm not going to do more of this stuff." So I really laughed it off and I didn't think it was important. And then fast forward just a few years and it quickly gained power. And I noticed that the artists, just because they got in at the ground floor, that's probably the singular reason that they were the earliest artists on there before there were restrictive algorithms. They were able to build these staggering sizes of audiences, and followers that then became the power, the propulsion of a highly successful career. Galleries approached them. They had collectors of stature coming in and buying their works. And then once Instagram realized its power, they started imposing these algorithms to not let everybody become a rock star overnight. And that's when I got it. I thought, okay, I clearly missed the boat, but I might as well get on board now. Also, the other big thing I would say is when I was younger, I think that way of being when I was younger as just a free floating bachelor and no family, just organize your time, man. Have a studio schedule. Organize lists of what you're working on and the idea of what are you going to work on tomorrow and write your hours down. I feel like I did lose a lot of time just thinking that, especially in your 20s and 30s, it feels like life is going to go on forever and that you've got a million years to work it out. And then what happens is a shocker is like you get to the end of your 30s and you go, whoa, wait a minute, that went by really fast. And then you get to the end of your 40s and it went by even faster. Your parents are very elderly and you're starting to take care of them. And you're like, that's going to be me in just a minute, in a blink of an eye. In 20 years, I'm going to be in the range of my parents' age. And when did I have time to master my craft or make these big, powerful career moves of having the solo show? No, man, make a schedule, sit your butt down, make some paintings for your next solo show, even though it's not even a real thing yet. Just in your mind, say, I'm going to start making work for my next solo show today. And I'm going to come up with 10 paintings that all feel cohesive. And I'm going to devote a certain chunk of time every day to working on that project.
Noah, as we wrap up this conversation, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience of artists and art professionals?
I think the most important thing that we all need to remember is to make artwork that you're passionate about and chasing that all the way down to its root. What's honestly inspiring to you? And to check ourselves, am I doing this in a strategic way to be an art star or to sell paintings or to be cool? I want to be an artist who's cool. I want you to look at my paintings and think, oh, that guy's paintings, those are really edgy and he must be really deep. Are we trying to concoct that instead of just making artwork that just down in our guts feels good and fulfilling? And a lot of times those things, they might be things that we're like embarrassed about because they aren't cool or they tap into something from childhood that feels sensitive. But I think that if it's real for you and it feels genuine and honest and feels like your voice without calculating anything of strategizing how you're going to get this painting to be in a blue chip gallery. I feel like a lot of artists go astray that way and become disingenuous. They lose their authenticity because they're strategizing for that goal. And I think that the whole point is to stay true to your voice, to those things that really mean a lot to you. And who cares what anyone else thinks? Just make that work that's honest, and the rest will fall into place.
Noah Buchanan reminds us that creativity and structure aren't opposites, they're partners. Through discipline and devotion, he's built a life that holds family, teaching, and painting in balance. In the end, Noah shows us that success in art isn't just about inspiration, it's about showing up, staying consistent, and creating from the truth of who you are. Keep painting, keep sharing, and keep building the life your art deserves. This podcast grows because people like you share it. So if you got value today, if it inspired you to think differently or take action, hit follow or subscribe and send it to one person who needs to hear it. That's how we keep making more episodes. Thank you for listening to the Professional Artist Podcast, and until next time.